This past winter, there was a buzz. Something had happened in our nation's capital. You see, there was this couple whose names beforehand were unknown to most Americans across the country. Their names, Tarek and Michelle Sahili. And they had found a way to sneak into a big dinner at the White House. And they hobnobbed with the best of them, getting their picture taken with Vice President Biden, going over to Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel and buddying up with him, and even getting their picture taken with him. And people wondered what had happened. Now, I would say one big concern was the security of the White House dinners. That was one level of concern. But I would wager that most Americans were also a little bit shaken and perhaps perturbed with this couple, because who in the world did they think they were? That they could go and join the ranks of Washington's elite without an invitation? Who were they that they thought they could go into this place and hobnob with these upper dignitaries in our government? What about humility? What about this sense of knowing your place in our society? There seemed to be frustration at this level. This sense of people thinking themselves better than what they might be. When we come here to church, we often hear stories about the table and people being invited or welcomed to the table. We practice open communion, meaning that all are welcome to come and gather around the table. The invitation is to all. That stands in stark contrast to a fancy Washington dinner. And as we come, we also tend to think about or wonder about this sense of humility. How do we approach this meal? How do we approach this place of worship? It seems no matter which denomination you consider yourself to be, whether you are a dyed-in-the-wool Lutheran or a Presbyterian, Episcopalian, even a Roman Catholic, there is this sense that as you come to church, you would hate to think yourself too proud. So we often say that we will just sit in the back. That is where we begin. And maybe over time, work our way up a pew or two. But there's something about not thinking ourselves too proud, approaching with a sense of humility. And as we come this day, we encounter this parable that has to do both with a sense of deep humility, but also a sense about who is welcome and how we are to welcome. So as we gather this day, I'd like to begin with the first part of this story from Luke, and this sense of what it means to have humility. What does it mean for us to be in community, both in this place and in the larger world? And to recognize that we come with a sense of who we are into this place. Now, humility is not beating ourselves up for who we are. It is not coming and groveling on our knees. There is a sin that can be as powerful and as challenging as pride, and that is one of self-negation, of beating ourselves up, of feeling like we can't come any farther than that back pew. What we are told is that each and every one of us are a beloved child of God, made in God's holy image. So that is our starting point as we hear this story of Jesus. Each of us is welcome as a beloved child of God. And then from that point, we enter into the story recognizing that we come to whatever feast, whatever party is prepared. We come perhaps comfortably, starting off at the back door, being told then to come in, come talk, come sit. Perhaps you will move around within the midst of that party. The recognition is that God then invites all. And Jesus tells us to imitate that, to continually mix and mingle. Now, we struggle with this story. As we talk about this humility and coming to the table, we would like to think of Jesus as this radical egalitarian who right away is going to step up and deliver the 1-2 punch to the social order that created such a hierarchy. That Jesus is going to get rid of the table altogether right away. But that's not where he starts. Perhaps because of those who had gathered, perhaps at the generosity of this Pharisee who was willing to throw a party and invite Jesus and the friends. But Jesus starts with the table, saying, seat yourself at the lower end, and then let the person invite you closer, closer to the head of the table. That's where he starts as he tells this story, this parable. The interesting thing, though, is that becomes the 1 punch. The 2 punch comes in the second part. There, he moves away from the parable and talks with this Pharisee, this leader, directly, saying that just as you have invited friends, brothers, relatives, and rich neighbors, you are now called to go out, to invite, to welcome the poor, the blind, the lame. You are called to enlarge this table. You are called not just to rub elbows with those with whom you are normally comfortable, or those that can repay you, but you are called to give an incredible gift to those who could never repay you. Those who have been standing at the margins on the street corners. Those who are standing at the gate, waiting to be known, heard, welcomed. As I reflect on this passage, I cannot help but tie it together with our second reading for today from Hebrews. For you see, when I started in seminary in Massachusetts, I began working at a church, First Lutheran Church in Lynn. Over the course of 3 years, we worked very diligently on what we were calling welcoming the stranger. And we told stories and gathered together. The first year that we did it, we had about 12 people in this nearly 400-member congregation show up. Both the pastor and myself were a little disappointed. Didn't people really want to welcome others? But as we told the stories of people who were struggling economically, of women and GLBT folks who have felt that they were on the periphery of the church or society, as we talked with those who were Latina, those who were African American, the stories became so palpable and so incredible that by the end of that 5 weeks, the 12 people who were gathered said, we need to do this again. And we need to make it bigger.